Yeah. All right. So I was just talking with Susan in Larchmont about the fact that there's no inventory, there's nothing to sell. So I thought that that might be as good a reason as any to kick off the season and talk about design with two of the preeminent design experts, in the market. Richard, a collector, and John Barman, who is one of the Architectural Digest 100 year after year. And I thought that it would be a nice juxtaposition because John, is trying to convince others, and Richard, he's on the receiving end of that. He's the guy who hires a John Barman, hires the experts. So, John, why don't you start and give us a little bit of better introduction, and tell us what it is you do.
Well, I'm an interior designer, so I help do residential work. I do it in the city and in the surrounding area, also in Florida. And residential work, really, design work now incorporates construction, because before we can do anything, we always have to make some architectural changes to the residence. So it's a matter of architectural design work and an interior design.
Okay. And it's in the Hamptons. It's where you have your own place, and New York City and Palm Beach. And from time to time, you'll come out to Connecticut.
Yeah, the New York suburbs are all part of New York.
It's all fair game. Okay. And Richard, where are you? Richard.
I'm at my home. I'm in the village, a building called the Butterfield House on 12th between 5th and 6th. And I'll tell you a little bit about the building. It's an iconic mid-century building for those who don't know it. It was designed by students of Walter Gropius right out of college, and it's kind of been known out of architecture school, and it's kind of been known as a sort of a special building from its inception. It's people either love it or hate it, but the ones that love it would live nowhere else, like myself. My husband and I, took us 5 years before we found the apartment that worked for us here. And we ended up in an apartment that was literally vacant for 11, 12 years before we bought it. The woman left after 9/11, and because she didn't want to sell it, she moved to Boston, and she eventually put it on the market, and we bought it in 2012.
Did you say you were waiting for the right apartment in that building?
Correct. I looked at about 5 apartments over about a 5-year period, either on a higher floor or lower floor, but they were too small. I didn't like the view, or the renovation wasn't a very good renovation. And I wanted a project that we could do that what we wanted. So, I'm not sure I'm quite as wealthy as most of John's Barman's clients, but we took 2 years to renovate our current apartment. It was a 2-year project, a year of planning, and I worked with a number of different I had my main architect team, but they hired other people for different purposes. But I had, it was a 2-year project, a year of design and a year of execution. So it was a labor of love, and I'll tell you a little thing which I didn't mention in our chat yesterday. I was here for about 3 years. My neighbor had a fire, and I actually had to redo it a second time. So I've actually renovated this apartment twice in my ownership of it in 8 years.
And
Did you make any changes?
Hire a designer?
Say again?
And what was the process? Did you hire a designer?
Yeah, so I hired a team that did both design and architecture. Because in New York State, if you're a licensed architect but you work with an interior designer, you can't certify plans. But my architect was an architect. He used to work for Thierry Despentes, which is a very well-known international architect, and a woman who did the finishes. So I had one person who did the drawings. He helped plan the layout of the apartment, because we did change some walls and so forth, and we had to bring up new electrical. We changed every surface, including the windows. We're a landmark building. That was a major process. And also all the surfaces. All my window sills, I have these big windows in the building, are travertine. I have a lot of my, a focal point of wall that's rosewood. All my doors are rosewood. And it was very special stuff. I literally, had him fly around the country to pick the right things. I worked with, and I had a lighting designer that did just my lighting, a guy named Bill Schwinghammer. John, do you work with Bill? You must.
No, I heard of him, no.
So Bill's a big lighting designer, fairly well known. I did my lighting. I had a different person do my kitchen. I had to have different window architects. So I had different things I had to do with my windows. I have an enclosed terrace, which is original to the building. And the building has jalousie windows, which are those louver windows. And no one did jalousie windows in New York City in 60 years. I had to find something. The building would only let me replace what I had if I replaced them with jalousie. So we had to go find an architect that could design, build it, and have it manufactured for us. So little details like that. But my thing was, this building was in the early 1960s. It has a very, mid-century modern aesthetic to it. And I wanted to bring it back to a mid-century modern aesthetic. So every surface, every detail was sort of well thought out in that case. And I collect contemporary art. There's a piece behind me, but I also collect mid-century furniture that with sort of a focus on both Italian and Brazilian furniture from the 40s, 50s, and 60s, as well as a scattering of Scandinavian and American as well.
When you renovated the apartment the second time, did you make changes or did you put it back?
I did. I made a few changes. I made up the mistakes I didn't do the first time. I added.
That's what I was asking.
I added some additional electricity in places I didn't to bring in some additional, like, I could put some like a light fixture, like a lamp. I also added, I had bought some, and you probably will know who these are, but I bought some Fontana Arte, Max Ingrand Fontana Arte sconces.
They're fabulous.
They're fabulous.
Fabulous.
And I have in my dining room, and we can show some pictures at some point, but I have in my dining room a Fontana Arte chandelier. So they're Max Ingrand as well, 1960.
Wow.
And but I didn't have the electricity in the wall for the thing. So they were literally, I bought them around, that they didn't buy it at the same time, but I bought them and I had them sticking in a closet. And so when I had the renovation done, I said, well, when I'm in the fire and I had to re-renovate, I used that as an opportunity to add some things like that. And how do let me see if I can share pictures. I'm going to see if I can, let's see.
I gotta say, your enthusiasm is infectious. And I have to think you are not John Barman's typical client. On the one hand, you're a dream client because you get the value of design. And when you say, I have people flying all over the country to pick out just the right rosewood, on the one hand, that's probably good, right, John Barman? On the other hand, shall we say, such an exacting client might be really tough to work for.
Robert, would you be able to show two different things? One of them, I showed a picture yesterday. It's my front hall where you walk in, that big wall of wood. Can you share that? Because I don't know how to share.
I never got that email. I got the one from the kitchen today.
Okay, let me see if I can figure out how to share this.
Go ahead, John, while he's figuring out the computer.
So, John, let me ask you something. Can we just go back
Robert,
to just
I'm going to send it to you. I'm going to text it to you.
You're going to text it to me.
Yeah, because
okay. That'll be a challenge. So, John, let's go back to, where does the architect stop and the designer begin?
That's always a question, because every architect's different. That's one thing that has to be worked out in every job. We have to find your position, and it often comes from who came first. If the client had the architect first, it puts them in a position of more control. But it has to be a compromise, because you have to work together to get the job done the way it should be done.
One of the things I also wanted to talk about was, I think of designers. I think of, a lot of people think a designer will come in and they'll over-design something. And at what point, or I was just curious, where do you take, it was about versatility, it was about risk. At what point is it okay to take a risk? At what point have you had experiences in your career where you've taken a risk and in retrospect, you think to yourself, maybe that wasn't so great?
I think you have to you take risks sometimes, but sometimes it's better if you do it on your own project. So you've tested things out. So when you're working with a client, you work with things that have already been tested.
Do you have clients who really want to take certain risks and you have to pull them back, say that's really not going to
Well, you
work.
don't want them to take risks that you feel is not going to work out, or things that are going to be not going to look right, because then they're going to be unhappy at the end. So you want to guide them. A little bit of risk is good. You don't want everything to be cookie cutter, but you have to do it within a parameter of things that they'll be comfortable with.
You're known
Also
for
don't wanna-
high color. I mean, you're known for risky design, edgy design. And I wonder, do you start with high color? And a lot of the time the client is just not prepared to go with a blue room or a pink room, or, you know, or such vivid color or such dramatic design choices, and they rein you back. You know, how does that conversation work?
Well, most clients don't want that much color. I only have a few that really love it. So it's a matter of introducing the client to the concept of color, because today most people are more comfortable with everything neutral. That's what they see, everything white and gray, and everybody would be happy with that. But there's a bit of a backlash against it because it's becoming too generic. It looks like every hotel they've seen. So people understand that they have to make things look a little warmer and more inviting and more individual. But then it's a matter of how far to go. So that's where the back and forth is.
And do they think of it as an investment that's going to make their property worth more, or do they think of it as an expense and a lifestyle change? I know, talking to Richard, he's got an answer for that. But how do you see most of the clients are regarding this as an investment or an expense?
If it's architectural work and structural, bathrooms, kitchens, paneling, they see it as part of investment and part of the apartment. The soft goods, they don't. And they do see artwork as being an investment, although that could go down, but and could go up. But furniture, they don't usually look at as an investment. Unless it's a designer piece, what Richard was talking about. You have certain pieces by well-known designers, and that's a different concept.
I mean, it's one of the concepts that I'm most interested in getting to the bottom of, is that in a market where you've got to differentiate your property. I read in that Wall Street Journal article that was part of the invitation, they said that realtors are now engaging interior designers to make sure that these properties stand out from a sea of white apartments.
Right.
And so I think, okay, and they talked specifically about $10 million, $3 million apartments. And they said, in order to command that kind of a premium, $10 million for this apartment, we're really going to have to zhuzh it up. And so they talk about it as an investment.
Well, that's good. But that's because maybe it's more the architectural work. And if the furniture will make it stand out, make it look better, maybe it'll sell for more, but a sofa in itself is not really an investment.
And I'm going to throw in two things. I think that, really good architecture and a really good designer who will work with an architect, with an architect and its client will suggest things that might be in the apartment, things like a lighting system or a sound system or details that, I would rather have my designer work on than my architect. I mean, architects can be great, but they're not always the best when it comes to finishes and the visual. Some art, but some art. A designer in my experience, is more visual on things, about doing things like the wall we just showed you. That was an architectural wall. An architect designed that, but a designer was the one who thought of those materials and so forth. And I do think that in what clients look for, and what I would look for if I were to buy something, would be to have a higher level of like couture workmanship, and a couture, finishes to things, because I think that to me makes a difference. And maybe that's something that tells a story and that's also true to the architecture for the project. You don't want to do this necessarily in a pre-war building, but this building, which was mid-century, is something you'd want to do, because that's a mid-century thing. Even down to the details of having the transom would be something you would have seen in '62 versus something you would see in 2020. In 2020, it would be a straight panel, and you wouldn't have the little break at the top, those little details.
Richard, it looks great, looks fabulous.
And the handles, all my handles are from the 20s, are nickel-plated Walter Gropius reissues from the 20s. You don't see them there, but that's all my hardware for all my doors. So again, it's going back to like the details of that that I think that is the work between the designer and the architect to help effectuate that. And even, there are details within these doors that make a difference. Things like they're stepped up, so when you close the door, you don't see any light coming through. So it gives it a better barrier, a light barrier or a sound barrier. Because that door leads to my bedrooms in the back, as an example. So do you have the other picture of my dining room, Robert?
I do. Can you not see that?
I don't see that. I just see I see that. And
I'll go back in. Hang on. Here we go.
So, and you can sort of see, and this is the dining room. And just to show you a few things, so, the sconces are Max Ingrand, 1960. The light fixture, also Max Ingrand, 1960s, by Fontana Arte. John will know who these people are. The credenza.
Very well-known people, beautiful things.
The credenza is Brazilian. It's got a name by name Tenreiro. That's probably the highest level of Brazilian design. And it's a unique piece, which is kind of nice. And then again, I have great artwork. I have a Beatrice Millhouses here on the right. On the left is an Alma Thomas. Do you know Alma Thomas's work, John?
Yes.
Yeah. So that's actually on the cover of her monograph. And the dining table I had made, and do you know who Van Keppel and Green were? They were designers out of LA in the 60s. And they did this table in a different material, but I had it recreated in bronze to fit my dining room. And it's 9 feet, it's a 9-foot long table. It's a fairly good sized table for a New York City apartment. And the chairs are also Brazilian, based on a Carlo De Carli design, who is an Italian person. So you can sort of see my mix of Italian and Brazilian that come in. And the
wood is a nice juxtaposition against the glass.
Yes. And I repeat the bronze elsewhere, something else in the apartment, but and on the floor is their cowhides, and they're again, I mean, they took me a year to get them because these cows are only slaughtered once a year in Italy, in Maremma, which is a province in Italy, once a year to get the pure white cowhide. So all these little details are things, again, you work with designers, and I had a person help me with some of this, and it is what is the furniture I sourced myself, but he helped me sort of get it refinished and put the upholstery. I have lamb's wool on those chairs and so forth. But it's a little color, not as much color as what John would normally do, but a little color in the apartment.
A little color in the artwork. You mentioned the designer working with the AV people and with the lighting people, but that's really an important part of what we do, because with the AV people, you want to make sure the speakers are in the right place. You want to make sure that the switches are in the right place. And with the lighting, you want to make sure that that's also in the right place for the artwork, for the furniture, working with the furniture layout.
I'm going to send a couple more photos. If you guys want a little eye candy, I'm going to just bear with me a minute. 1, 2, let's go.
Don, I was looking at your portfolio, and I wanted you to tell me if I can get this to come up.
Robert, I can't hear you.
I'm sorry. I was looking at your portfolio, and I wanted you to tell me about this.
Yes, I want to hear about that too.
That's a client that really likes color. It's one of my few clients who really likes it. And I've done different houses for her, and each one was a different theme. One house we did was a Chinese theme that was in East Hampton. This was a Venetian theme. Because once we pick a theme, it was easier to sort of focus in on how everything would work out. But she loves intense color, and the more intense, the better. But those people. Where is this house? This was on East 59th Street. It was a penthouse.
Wow.
It was mixed with modern art, so we used a lot of the colors from the artwork to be mixed in.
Do you start with the color, or do you start with their existing collection and then build around it?
Well, the dining room, we started with the collection because she had that wonderful Joseph Cotton painting. But the other rooms, it was a matter of finding, this room was a matter of finding the rug that we liked very much and building from that.
Okay.
And then we picked the painting that she had to go with that. This was a raw space, really. It was an outside space, enclosed, but very raw. It had bricks were showing, and the floor was rough. We put in this marble floor, heated underneath, and built bookcases down the length of it. and put this 35-foot sofa in there to give it some function because it was a very narrow space. So we made it into a completely usable, elegant room, rather than just looking like part of a rooftop.
It's beautiful.
There's the master bedroom, and that's a different project there.
Yeah, of
That's
course.
Miami. Yeah.
So since we're talking about color and we're looking at a series of very colorful, I would think that part of the fear is that color comes in and out of style. One of the reasons people are all doing white kitchens and white is they feel like, oh, well, white is not risky. It never goes out of style, and I can always accessorize around white. And the fear is with a blue room or pink room that I'm not going to be able to sell it to somebody else. And I'm going to have to repaint, I'm going to have to reverse it in order to sell it. And I'm going to get tired of it in the next couple of years. So how do you answer that? How do we
Well, and I think kitchens go out of style you can tell a 10-year-old kitchen, every 10 years a kitchen's out of style. You can keep a kitchen for a very long time and come back again in 30, 40 years. But kitchens easily get dated. So when doing a kitchen, you really have to go with what's current. You can't really go with just what you like. The appliances change, the countertops change. People use granite, now they don't want granite. And right now,
The idea of timeless with a kitchen does not
no, it's like a car.
mesh.
It's like a car. Now, a vintage car looks great, a vintage kitchen looks great. But every few years, a car looks dated. Every few years, a kitchen's dated. So there, you really have to go with what current is. You can do some things in color, but that's sort of permanent to the house and really is not easily changeable. So usually, white kitchens really do look good to me too. But in the other rooms where you add color, it's easy to change because whatever you do, somebody buying it doesn't necessarily want that color. People have color preferences really are sort of inbred in the person. Some people just don't like certain colors and they like other colors. And I don't think it necessarily changes in their lifetime.
So the design of that property that we just looked at, should that last a generation? What's the life cycle of that?
Well, that was done recently, but her other house, which is also in my book in East Hampton, which is the Chinese house, I mean, that was done 20 years ago and it still looks fantastic. And when we redid it, we just made it more Chinese and colorful because it was something that held up and looked really good. But people don't necessarily get tired of color.
Do you have clients that every 7 or 8 years are like, we just need to change this up? And they just completely have a departure from what they had and they go in a completely different direction?
It happens more with technological changes. If people have an apartment that's done and then 10 or 15 years later, it's just not right anymore. The lighting's outdated. The AV system's outdated. And everything has to be done for that. So at that point, then they change.
But not someone who's going, like, for example, the woman who had that project we just looked at, she would not completely just switch gears and go, we're going mid-century modern now.
No. But I do find it the other way around. When people get a second house, sometimes they like the first house so much they want the same look in the second house. And I try to encourage them not to do that because each house should be separate. So when you're there, you get to move to the place where you are and you're in a different place. I don't think
Let's
a house.
talk about Richard Grossman. How do you work with a client like Richard who is so involved? He's up on eBay looking for the Walter Gropius doorknobs, at night because it's fun and he wants to be part of the project. I mean, he's driving the project. How do you work with an involved and expert client?
Well, it's a treat to be able to work with somebody who's so knowledgeable and knows what they want. But you have to make it clear with them that it's not a competition, that they're doing their part and you're doing your part, and define what you're doing so you're not stepping on their toes or vice versa.
And I'm going to throw this out. I worked with professionals on this. And one of the things, yes, I love certain things, but they also brought ideas to me that I would never have thought of. An example is, the sofa I'm sitting on is an Italian sofa, and I had it, what in Italy, I brought it here, I had it recovered. And, very simple gray pattern, nice. But he also suggested doing all the welting around it in a very dark brown leather, okay? So it gives it a little extra detail that I wouldn't have thought of. And little things like that is what you work with, the designers, and they help you, and as much as they help you, you help them. And I agree with John said, it's not a competition, it's a collaboration. And that, they'll tell you what you like. And there may be budgetary issues involved as well. They may suggest something that's more than you want to spend, and you'll work things out in a different way. But having a good dialogue and being honest with things is part of it, is part of how you develop something that goes along that you both like, and that ultimately looks finished. At the end of the day, it's a little bit like wearing very good, I'm going to make this more of a woman's clothes thing, but wearing very good women's clothing is timeless. You look at a woman's gown from 30 years ago, it is, chances are, you could wear that today and it'll be just as beautiful. Good, beautiful design. It may look, yes, there may be dated, maybe the kitchen appliances look a little dated, maybe they've come up with certain things, but it'll still look beautiful. It's taken care of 20 years later, in my opinion. Good design pays for itself over time because it lasts, in my opinion.
I think a living room, all the furniture in the rooms can last forever. It doesn't need to be redone. It's just the kitchens that get dated, but a living room can be, you stick with it, it can be that way forever if it's done right the first time.
Right. You want to talk about art? We could talk about that as well.
Yeah, well, so I think we've touched on that a bit. We've talked about starting with a piece and building around a piece. And I know that you've got an extensive collection. You told me yesterday that you can only fit 25% of it in your house, and the rest
Correct.
of it you have to go store somewhere else. That's an unusual problem. Most of us don't have that problem.
Right. So
But-
there you're looking at my bedroom
Mhm.
and my living room. You're going back and forth. But and so even here right now, the piece all the way on the left is not there. I have a Karen Kalimnik there, but but again, this in my bedroom, I went with a lot of very black and white things in there. And the piece in the middle, it's a drawing. It's a Basquiat. And the drawing to the left is a Louise Bourgeois drawing from the 50s, which is an early piece from her. But it's also, and we specifically went in here in this room, and you don't see the whole room, but a lot of things that are very muted in color. I have a Bruce Nauman in there that's black and white. I have some black and white Peter Hujar photographs in there, and it's all very black and white in terms of the color palette and so forth. Because we wanted something very muted in there. My living room, it's a little different, and again, I've had different things over time in there, but you sort of see, the big painting is a Tip Dunham painting, and that's big bright red. I used to have a Sean Scully painting there that I don't have there anymore, but I still have a small Sean Scully gray painting all the way on the left. That's the checker piece on the right. The Cream of Tartars in storage, and I now have above me a William Kentridge piece. It's my most recent purchase. I bought that last year. And you can see I don't know if you know who Kusam is. That's the black and white piece next to the Tip Dunham. I have a Elizabeth Payton to the left. Alex Israel's The Egg, and below there you can hardly see it. I have a Carl Andre on top of that bar as well. And you can sort of see also, to bring in a little, not just color, but fun on the chairs, which match the sofa, we did Fortuny fabric just to give it a little bit more texture, just to give it a little sort of fun. And the pop of orange they're very rare Scandinavian pieces by a guy named Preben Fabricus from the 60s.
Leather?
They're leather. They're original, and they're all original. I bought those at auction just before we even moved into the apartment. I saw them and I wanted to have them. And they are, and I've never seen them at auction since. I bought them at Right 20, probably 7-8 years ago.
Well, the color's great. Your color pops against the light color carpeting and everything.
Exactly.
It's a nice feeling of color, and it ties in with the rest of the decor and looks great.
Right. And then this is our den, and just, little finishes, like, even the way this is a sofa that was custom made for us, but even the way the arm in the back is framed by the desk in the back, and the desk has some beautiful details on it. It's Italian from the 50s. it's framed that so you don't see through. So little details like that is why you work with a designer, because I would have never thought of that. That's something my designer thought of. And then a little pop of colors. So there's the blue Nana Dietzel chair, which is that sort of half round chair on the left in there. Aging
A
Purcell.
little pop of color.
A little pop of color.
A little pop of color.
I now have a very big, the big painting in the middle is gone, and I have a big red painting there instead. So that's
That must have
pop
changed the
color
room.
with it.
The room must look completely different then.
It does look much different, but but for us, the artwork comes and goes. So we live with something, and we buy a new piece, and we put it up, and that piece lasts for a period of time, and then we take it down and we put it in storage, and we take something else out. So for us, that's it's sort of a rotation for us. And
Do you bring things back that you have in storage that you'd put
we
away?
do. We bring things back. We sell things. We buy more things. And we have a lot of art. I mean, it's a large part of how we live our life, and it's a large part of our of what we do. So we love it. We're always buying things, always buying stuff. Literally, we were
John,
talking
have you
about
had anybody,
last night.
John, have you had anybody say, look, I just bought this Picasso or this George Condo, and I want it, I need you to kind of make the room around, this is going to be the centerpiece, something that's a really extraordinary piece of art that someone said, build this room around this.
It happens a lot. I mean, that house that I talked about, the Chinese house in East Hampton, it started from a painting, which was with Chinese people on it. And we built the whole house from that one painting. And it was a 15,000 square foot house, but that was the start.
It's a big house.
And that the picture you showed before of the aqua room with the dining room, that the pink Joseph Cotton was how we started that room. So that does happen. And it's a good way for it to happen.
Now, is that a significant piece on the wall behind you? Is that something that you built the room around? Or you had a great room and you're like, nope, when you saw that piece, you're like, I know the perfect room that would fit in.
Yeah, I started with the painting, and I used those colors, and those colors are intertwined in the room.
Mm-hmm. Well, I want to know how you solve problems through design. As a realtor, I often, I have to sell what the clients give me, and I have an incredible estate, right, that I have to sell this spring. And it's got incredible land, it's got incredible architecture, but the decorating was clearly done in 1980. And so, I think a lot of us as realtors struggle with, should we recommend to our clients, that they engage a designer and repaint? A lot of us just say, you know what, we need to paint this white because we're realtors. We don't know any better, and we want to do what's safe. Can you make the argument that we could go a little bit further? We could say, listen, we can work with what you've got here. We just need to, replace a few things, and we can basically update an older look. In this case, it's a perfectly good Lilly Pulitzer look from the 80s that's just not quite working now. I mean, the bell bottom, we're still waiting for bell bottoms to come back in, and it's difficult. Frankly, it is difficult for a lot of the buyers to look past the decorating in some of these great estates.
I agree.
Well, it's safe doing it white because you don't know what the person buying it's going to want. Everybody wants something different, so it's white certainly is probably the right answer for them.
But you know what? So I'm going to argue, and I'm going to say, but what happens is then we go white, and everybody says, this looks really cold and clinical, and it doesn't look cozy, and it doesn't look like a place I could live in. Right now, it looks like a place you could raise a family in. You could live there. It just looks a little bit tired. And I think that we could take just one or two of the overstuffed sofas out, and we could work with the colors. If we could just reimagine some of the spaces. And I think that's really the value of a designer, is to reimagine the spaces given some of the things that you have to work with. You have to work with Richard's collection. You have to work with my collection. And in this case, the big estate, you'd have to work with some of what she's got in the house already. And I think that might be a point of intersection where we realtors could start thinking of designers to go further than staging, just merely staging. When we want to differentiate a property, maybe we can engage somebody like yourself to really think, go further. I don't know.
That's real life, because when the client hires you, so often they have a lot of things they want to keep, and you matter keeping what you can and just changing it around, even as a concept, because it's their things and they like it. They just want it to be new and updated. So you do use things that exist, add some new things with it, take things out and change it around.
So at what point in the process should I hire you? I'm buying a house this spring, and should I hire you after I've engaged the architect, or I should hire you first and let you me pick an architect, right?
Definitely first.
Okay. And how did you do it, Richard? When you went through it,
Well, I chose a firm that had a designer and architect that worked as a team, and I did it even before I knew I wanted this apartment, but I brought them into very, very, very. These are beautiful. I love that. I brought them in very early on because we had a lot of decisions to make, and literally, it was a very detailed, a very long process, a very detailed process, and literally, you're choosing every piece. And one of it too is, John said, working with things you own or working with things that are there. That is something that a good designer will do, especially if there's something you like or you want to own and so forth, you want to have. They'll understand that. We don't have a lot that we mostly changed everything out of this apartment before we bought it, furniture wise, but there were a few pieces that we wanted to keep, and that was important to us. I'm also going to sort of go back to your idea, maybe as an experiment, if you're going to, instead of painting everything white, what about doing a wall of color in a room, or maybe in the entrance wall, just to spice it up a bit. The nice thing about paint is it's not that expensive to paint over if you make a mistake. I'm not saying it's free, but it's paint. It's not like it's not like you invested a huge sum of money. It's paint, it's time, it's a little effort.
The only thing is paint has to be done right. It has to be a quality paint job or it doesn't look good, because finishes today are very important.
That's a good point.
It's not a matter of just slapping the paint on the wall. It has to really be, in a nice house, it has to be really well done. This apartment you're looking at now, this client's moved a few times, and she always she has to take all her furniture with her. And we just have to make it look different every place. But this is a client that wants to take what she has.
And that looks like a Fontana Arte light fixture as well.
It is, it is, yes.
It is. Yeah,
this apartment was at the San Remo. It sold for one of the big sales of the week. It went for 26 million. This one.
Beautiful.
It was reusing furniture that she had, when mixing with new things,
and the chairs in the other one. Who are those by? Go back to the dining room.
Milo Bowman.
The dining room chairs are Milo Bowman?
No, those are Warmly.
Those are Warmly. Yes, yeah. Those are beautiful. Are the Milo Bowman? Are they directional or Thercogan?
This would have been directional. Yeah.
Directional. Interesting.
You guys are dropping a lot of really exotic names like Fontana fixtures. And so for the rest of us in the room who don't have any name brand, fixtures and name brand artists, can we get that look without getting the name brand? Can you help me if I say, I really like that apartment you just did at the St. Regis, and I say that's what appeals to me. You can recreate that, right? With less expensive, because you understand, what about that style is working. You can recreate that for less money. Is that one of the values of a designer, or is that just
partly? But maybe it's a combination of high-low. You have some good things and you have some less expensive things, and the good things make it give it a quality look. But everything doesn't have to be top of the line.
Okay.
Sofas can be generic, but light fixtures need to be good.
Okay, so that's the key. What are the other things that we have to start with? Some great light fixtures and some great color. And I keep hearing about chairs. You guys are both, oohing and eyeing over the chairs. I have to say the chairs seem to be pretty important.
Well, they have to be comfortable. It's one of the most, being comfortable is one of the most important parts.
Right.
I think, first of all, function comes first. The rooms have to function. It has to be the function that you want it to have and the way you're going to live in it. And then the furniture comes after. And do you want a desk? Do you want the desk in the living room? Do you want a bar in the living room? Do you want a TV in the living room? Well, all of this has to come first, how you're going to live in it, and then pick what's right.
All right, Richard, what do you want to know?
I don't know. That's I love the one, and I can't remember the name of the painting, the all white painting, who by it Paces his dealer, and I can't think of his name. Going back one, but that's a beautiful room. This is a nice art collection.
Yeah.
Rothko?
That's a
No.
Rothko?
No.
Looks
It's contemporary art.
Looks like a Rothko.
yeah.
Looks like one, but it's all that.
But is it Alex Katz?
That's an Alex Katz. Yeah. This client pretty much neutrally let me put the chairs in the those red chairs in the dining room, which changed it completely.
Right.
These
So-
are extraordinary pictures, and I have to wonder, and a lot of our audience has got to wonder, how much of it is because you've got a $10 million piece of art hanging on the wall, and it just makes everything else look good around it. And you've got these really sleek sofas that sort of complement whatever else you've got going on the walls. How much of it is dependent on the fabulous art on the wall?
Well, this client is a collector, but the art doesn't have to be top of the line artwork. You can find paintings done by up and coming artists that look very nice and can make a room look great.
Right.
Erica Barrett, are you on the call? Unmute yourself, Erica.
I am on the call.
Erica is one of the top dealers of contemporary art in the city. And are you also seeing that people start with a fabulous collection and then they say, okay, I need to decorate around this?
Most of the time I'm called in from the beginning because my clients tend to start with art. And so the designer has to kind of work around what we've decided. But a really good relationship is when you have a really good designer and architect that understand that their walls have to be flexible. So I'm in the middle of a project right now that was built in Yellowstone Club in Montana. And we realized after the house was built that we needed to get a painting in. So we rebuilt the house. So we raised the roof and redid the entire project because we needed to fit a painting.
And sometimes, because you're a dealer, somebody has bought a fabulous piece of real estate and then they come to you and say, I need a piece of art for this fabulous apartment I just purchased or this fabulous house. Does it work both ways?
It definitely works both ways. I think the preferable way is, and I think Richard, because of Adam, and I think Adam's also on the call, it really has to start with what you love. And if you love something, you figure out a way of making it work. And I always find that if you have a spectacular art collection, you need to kind of balance, and the design needs to speak to the art and the art needs to speak to design. And if it works really well together, there's a synergy and the property totally comes together. The house that we bought from you, full disclosure, is a 1957 house in Stamford. And within a week of moving in, we already filled the house with our art collection, and the entire house comes out of the idea of the Bauhaus. And so everything that we put in the house, except for one example, everything in the house is dated from 1955 to 1962.
As soon as you finish filling up that house, I can recommend probably 30 realtors on this call who could sell you another house and you can fill that one up too.
No, I'm good. I'm bankrupt thanks to you, John. But I think art ultimately, I think it really elevates a property. And to the point, yeah, there are definitely younger artists that can definitely be filled in, but good art can make anything look spectacular.
Oh, it definitely does, and it also makes the client look more intellectual and more refined and more cultured. It works in every direction.
Absolutely.
Now, I want to point out another guest on the call, Scott Hobbs, and only because I said, which comes first, the architect or the interior designer? And Scott likes to remind me, no, talk to your builder before you hire an architect, because you can make a big mistake if you start with your architect and then you engage a builder. So why is that, Scott?
I don't actually say that.
Oh,
I end up saying you want to end up assembling the whole team so you can get the creative people together along with somebody who has to deliver the bad news about here's what it actually costs and here's what you can or can't do. And then you get a great collaboration. I mean, I agree with John that, you know, as far as the architect or designer who comes first, the objective is to get a great team. And there's different roles to be filled. And when you're playing on a great team, you really want great players. And the better the players are, the more fun it is, the more likely you're able to come up with something that's, you know, an outcome that nobody individually could have come up. I mean, Richard's comments on, yes, I got this pop, I got this idea, I could draw something. And that's the power of having a great team.
Richard,
So,
Richard, talk to us more about the Butterfield house renovation. You talked about, I think from my notes yesterday, you said there was an AV architect, a lighting guy.
So there's a lot of professionals you use and you rely on them. So we had a team, which was 2 people. It was a design architect and a designer. Okay. That was Martel Doniger. Those were our lead people who we started with, had a previous relationship with. We had an AV guy, a AV person just for a sound system and all that, because if you want to do it right, that's something that's important. We had a lighting designer, Bill Schwinghammer, who did our lighting for us, because again, you know, this is something that if you're doing it once, you want to get it done right. So a person who did all the lighting throughout the apartment. We had a special window architect that I mentioned as well, because we had to rebuild a window that wasn't there. And I had a kitchen designer as well, who just did my kitchen, because I did that, you know, I like Italian design, but I did a modern glass. And you actually have a picture of my kitchen I sent to you. I don't know if you want me to send it again. You can see a picture of a design architect just for the kitchen. And so those were some of the different people that we used. And, you know, and then when that was all done, I had a different person that helped me put the design together for the apartment. That's more like the interior design, things like the furniture and things like that. Because quite frankly, I would not have known how to buy fabrics, or even more importantly, I thought I could do some of this on my own. And I learned that I couldn't, because I wasn't getting things at the right size. I was buying things and it wasn't working. And it was actually a dealer, and that's my bathroom, one of the bathrooms. One of the dealers that I went to suggested this guy, and I worked with him, and he helped me like figure scale and color and details that I never would have thought of before. I just didn't have that. I don't have the expertise. I know I love furniture, and I know I love the looks of things, but I don't know how to put it together. So that was the last person that we used. That was sort of, you know, the scope. So we had a lot of different professionals. A lot of them were early on when we first did it. And then when we started decorating, we hired someone else to help us with the decoration.
Your kitchen's perfect. You can tell it's new, it looks right, looks correct today. It looks fantastic.
Right. It's everything is glass. The only appliance that you can see, which you really can't see, is the range, but everything else is sort of hidden, and which is what I want. And if you go into my kitchen right now,
what are the countertops?
The countertops are actually a type of granite, although they don't look like quote granite. They're actually the same material that the Whitney Museum used in the original Whitney Museum on Upper East Side as exterior clad of their building. So it doesn't look like they're your typical granite, which I didn't want, and I really wanted marble. If I could have done what my heart said, marble. The problem is, I'm a cook. I use my kitchen every day, and marble doesn't last for me. And so I wanted something that was more durable. And this kitchen now, picture is brand new when it was new, but it looks just like this. There's not a ding in the countertops don't have a scratch in them, not a ding, not nothing. And it looks
Is the backsplash the same as the countertops?
Backsplash is the same as the countertops. I wanted a seamless sort of thing. And then there's and the kitchen behind me where where the photo is being taken from is a like a bar against the window with 2 seats so we can do and look out the window and have dinner. So that's.
Is that a Val Cucina? Is that Val Cucina kitchen?
It is a Val Cucina kitchen.
We have the same kitchen.
And it is Val Cucina, and and the designer, got me. It is a Val Cucina kitchen. It was my second Italian kitchen that I did. I did a Verena kitchen, a polyform kitchen before this in my old apartment. But I went with this, and it was a little bit like it's to me, it's just design is just perfect. And little details out there I like. But good eye, Robert.
Our kitchen in the city is the exact same thing.
Yeah,
Time and
so you
dust.
probably dealt with. Yeah. So,
It was a long time ago. It was 2008, 9, something like that.
yeah. Did you deal with Tal Grunberg? Do you
I think
remember?
so.
Yeah, he was
Yeah,
the guy
I
I
think
dealt.
so. This name sounds familiar. So
Yeah.
one of the things that
And
we
this-
spoke about yesterday was about over renovating in the wrong space. That we should
Sure.
kind of talk. Because I
So,
have a
or even-
client. I have
and
a
I'm gonna
client
go.
that I spoke about yesterday. Let me just introduce that. She bought a pre-war apartment, amazing, grand, 10, 12-foot ceilings, and she wanted to maintain the integrity of that. The entire apartment needed to be gut renovated. Someone has been living there for 60 years. And she had quotes to renovate the apartment for 1.2, 1.3, 2 or 3. But then she went with a known architect with a name, and she spent easily twice that. And it looks extraordinary and it's amazing. And the one comment that I just remember is that architect came in because the idea was there was a lot of restoration to be done, but it was kind of to make it really just look almost the same. And she commented her, said, it's really expensive to make it look like we didn't do anything. And the question is, was it worth it?
Well, you told me the location of that property, okay?
Yes.
And I'm going to tell you at that location, which was at 5th Avenue and 11th Street in New York City, I would tell you yes, because it's a location that will be desirable for people. But you have to be careful. If you went, 15 blocks north or 12 blocks north and 2 or 3 avenues over to Gramercy Park, which is a beautiful neighborhood, I'm not sure you would get the same amount of money. And that would be the right thing to do for that building and that location. But if you're in a location where people will spend the money, and there are a number of those in the city. You mentioned the San Remo, you mentioned, other buildings, people will do that. And I'm going to go conversely, you have to be careful. If you're in a building that warrants a certain level of renovation, don't do a lower level of renovation, because anybody else coming in, if they're going to be buying that apartment, they're not going to want what you did. They're going to want the name brand appliances, the highest level of appliances. They're going to want the finishes that have, the sound system or the lighting system. They're going to want things like that, in my opinion. So it has to be appropriate for the location. We lived in an apartment around the corner from here before we bought this. And it was a beautiful apartment in a beautiful building, but it wasn't quite where we are now. It wasn't special. It wouldn't have been appropriate to do what we did here in that building, because no one buying in that building would pay for it. Here, I'm comfortable that if I were to sell this, I would be able to find somebody who would pay me for the work and the improvements I did in the property, notwithstanding the fact that the market probably went up and has come down since I bought this apartment, quite frankly.
There are telltale signs. You do see, like, if you see cheap, inexpensive appliances, you do wonder when they've just done a renovation, you're like, where else did they kind of cut corners?
Appliances are an easy thing to catch that they're cheaper, because everybody knows what's what. And it
Right.
does make the whole thing look cheaper.
Yeah, that's a good
Not a
point,
good-
Robert.
Not a
point.
good place to skimp.
John Barman, do you ever go at the beginning and say, I think that budget is too much for this building, or I think that budget is not enough for what we want to do in this building? Does sometimes the location, the apartment warrants a much different budget than what the client's starting with?
Yes, but I never had one that was too much. It's only been the other way.
I thought that was a strange way of couching that too.
No, but see, Roberto, but you get that question all the time, right? If I spend 1.5 to buy this apartment and I put another $1 million into it, will I get it out? That's a question
Of course.
that we get all the time. And we tell them a lot of the time, don't do it. If what you really want is a $3 million apartment, then we should be looking at something else.
Yeah, but it also depends upon someone's time horizon. Like that apartment that we showed with John, that John did, that had all of the colors, she's not reselling that.
Right, right.
He's there for a long time.
We did architectural
So she
changes
can
too.
invest.
I mean, the colors could be changed as the furniture, but the architectural work, making that solarium room, I mean, that's permanent to the apartment. But when I go into an
There's a
apartment,
lot.
I know what the renovation is going to cost right away. But I can't always tell a client because they don't always want to know the number at the beginning. They have to be eased into it.
I know
For a client, they
huge
could take the
range-
number immediately.
There's a huge range in the city for sure. But what would you say for someone just a standard, if you're going to go into the San Remo or you're going to go into the Brentmore or you're going to be along Fifth, you're going to spend $600 a square foot?
Square foot. It's funny, I don't always, I could do it in square foot. I don't really think that way off the top of my head.
So generally, I mean, it's,
Yeah,
what do we think?
it was five, yeah, 600 square foot. Yeah. Yeah.
That'll get you there.
Yeah.
Anything less, and we need to find you something else, right?
Yeah.
You know,
Or they can, or they don't have to, if they have a budget, they just have to be realistic what they're doing. Maybe you don't change some of the bathrooms if that's what they want. They really want to keep to the budget. Some people set a budget,
Okay,
they
so
really
the-
want to hold to it. Then you have
So
to
what's
figure out how to
that
do it.
budget in Connecticut? What's that, how does that change in Connecticut or in the Hamptons?
Scott Hobbs. I remember going to one of your clients' houses where you said, see these floors? He spent $600 a foot on these floors, John. And I was like, really? Yes, he wanted what he wanted. And when we built up the floors and we didn't like the color, we took them all the way down, these antique reclaimed wood floors, and brought them back up again. So Scott, what's it cost for excellence in Connecticut?
Well, you can't actually get to, I mean, I don't think you can actually get to flooring at $600 a foot. I mean, we've had people who have tried, but I don't think you can. I mean, I think a huge question is, what are you trying to include also? Because there's construction costs, there's design costs, and then there's furnishings. And the furnishings is an entirely separate budget that we don't typically deal with. I mean, for construction itself, you're probably somewhere inside of it in New York City apartment, you're probably starting for very nice stuff for what we're talking about here, it's 600 to 700 a foot, but you can easily get up to 1,000 and you can easily go double that. In Connecticut, you actually get a house. You know, you can do a stone Georgian starting at 650 a square foot, which gets you the basement, the exterior cladding and the roof and all those other sort of things for that same 650 that you'd get for inside of New York City. And the Hamptons is very comparable to the Connecticut marketplace as far as pricing goes.
But
then-
I'm also going to just add, you're talking about flooring, and John, you'll know some of these things. Our architect took us to someone in the A&D building. I think it was Carlisle Floor. Does that name sound
Yes.
familiar?
Yes.
And we walked in there, they had beautiful floors. It was everything I wanted. And I was like, we walked out of there and went, well, we're going to pick one of the 3 floors they showed us. This is what we're getting. And then he said, well, I want to take you to one other place. He takes us to IJ Pizer. I'm sure you know IJ Pizer.
Right. They run a long
Okay.
time.
We go to IJ Pizer. IJ Pizer's floor was 4 times the price. But I turned to my husband and I said, well, and we said to each other, we can't have anything but the floor we just saw. 10 minutes before that, I woke up that morning and didn't know this floor existed. By the end of the day, I couldn't have anything other than that floor. And I'm saying that it's a little humorously, you can value engineering. I didn't have to go with that floor, but it's what we chose to do. And when we had the fire, the big expense was replacing that floor and everything on top of it, because everything rests on the floor. You have to rip everything out to get the floor back down. And it's something that I said, I want the floor I had. I mean, I could have done something different and kept the insurance money perhaps, but I said, no, I want what I want. So a little bit is, what do you want? What are you willing to spend and so forth? I mean, I don't have a second home. I don't have other places I have to pay for. This is what I wanted. And so you talk about value engineering. There was nothing wrong with the Carlisle floor. They're beautiful. I think they're a good quality, beautiful floor and a custom quality floor, but it's still not IJ Pizer. So there's different levels, even at the upper end of the marketplace. Would you agree with that, John?
Yes, definitely.
Yeah.
And I think it's important not to lie to yourself. I think it's important not to lie to yourself, because what would have been a mistake is if you'd gone in and saw that floor and then said, well, I can find it cheaper somewhere else. I mean, when you get to the artistry of a lot of these finishes, you can't be cheap on the artistry. If that's what you want, you got to pay for it, or you're going to be happy.
Correct.
And waste your money.
Correct.
Richard Grossman, I know you only have the one apartment and you got a lot of art in storage. Scott Hobbs can help you for only $600 a square foot. He can help you and build you the house of your dreams. And we have plenty of room out here in Connecticut for you.
I know. And you have the architecture of houses that that I love. Here, I'm just going to,
Now, I want to address that. We're talking about mid-century modern, and I know there's a lot
Robert,
of fans.
I just sent you a quick picture showing what the floors look like the day we moved in. You'll see these floors. They're kind of dramatic.
What are the floors?
It's the floors are supili, African supili. There's a type of mahogany
Right.
are the floors.
And how wide are the planks, Richard?
I don't know, but they're the widest we could get them. So whatever they were, that whatever
Okay.
IJ Pizer does is the widest is what we got.
Yeah.
And you'll see. Sorry, John, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, but I want to reflect on the fact that you are a big fan of mid-century modern, and I don't think that a lot of New Yorkers understand that from say 1949, when Philip Johnson does his glass house, and then the Harvard Five follow him out here and start building houses. Most of what they built is about 2,000 square feet, and so when a lot of New Yorkers come out here and say, "Do you have? Can I have a mid-century modern of sort of a 4,000 or 5,000 square foot?" That doesn't really exist. What has to happen is you have to find a great piece of architecture, maybe a 2,000 foot, 1,600 foot example, and then you hire somebody like Scott Hobbs to extend it and add a lot of the modern conveniences and a lot of the modern rooms that didn't exist. And a lot of the Philip Johnson houses out here have been extended. Elliott Noyes, Philip Johnson, the Frank Lloyd Wright house on Frogtown has been expanded several times in cooperation with the foundation. But I just think it's interesting that when I say you need a space for your art and you're like, yep, I'm going to buy one of those mid-century moderns, I have to remind you, they're tiny. And I know New Yorkers say, I can do tiny, but not when you have art collection like yours. You can't do tiny.
That's true. But I got to tell you, from a house point of view, I think 2,000 feet is plenty of house for me. If I were to buy a house, those houses are the right size. But everyone is big houses don't excite me, and I know that's counterintuitive for someone in real estate. But I like I'd rather have better design with a smaller home.
All right, I can hook you up. There is a house in New Canaan that looks like the TWA terminal at Kennedy. I think that's the house for you, except for the fact that when it's got all that glass, there's no place to hang all your art. So we're back at the beginning.
Was that Alice Lawrence's house?
It's a 44 Benedict Hill Road. It was done by James Evans in 1960. And it's got one of those parabolic roofs.
Well, I know the house.
Just like the TWA terminal. And when you think about a house like that, and I just happen to use that as an example, that's 1,600 feet, right? With the bedrooms down below and another roughly 1,000 feet. It's a tiny house, and it's one big room upstairs with glass walls all the way around. And then you go downstairs in the basement for the bedrooms.
It's a beautiful house.
No room for your art. We're going to have to keep looking. All right, it's 5:05. You have any parting words, Roberto? What do we have on deck next week?
Next week, we have Lisa Littman, who's going to join us. One of the top brokers in the country and definitely one of the top brokers in Manhattan. She's fabulous, and we may have someone else join her as well, but we hope you'll come back.
All right. And
Thank you for having me, guys. Nice to meet everyone, and nice to meet you, John.
Nice
Well,
to meet you.
I want to do a proper thank you. So proper thank you, Richard, for letting us into your home, talking about the process, talking about the pain and all the decision points. I mean, this is a really great and detailed look at how you go through this at the very highest levels. So thank you for that. This was really
My
great.
pleasure.
Yeah.
It was very nice. It was great to see you, Richard. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, guys.
And
Thank
John
you,
Barman,
Richard. It was really
your
informative. Thanks so
portfolio,
much.
very exciting. I can't wait to buy this house and have you solve all my problems this spring.
I can't wait to help you. Okay.
All right, you're on.
Take care, guys.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Bye-bye.